angsty. So they had death threats, they were chased, they couldn't get apartments. My mother would have to go and see the apartment on her own, and then when she signed the contract, have to bring my father in and watch their mouths drop. But around that, they actually, how they discussed it was humor. They actually found it funny when they could sort of overcome it or stomp on it, and it was treated as something that was not serious, but that it was not to take space in our lives that was negative, that drew us down. So my sense of that was that racism didn't get a place to conquer our family. So with that, my first question being for Marcus and Alexis, how was racism discussed? What were the conversations in your home growing up? Or were there any conversations?
Well, in our home, for sure there were. Both of my parents were from the southern states originally, even though I grew up on the West Coast. And so we were all, and I grew up in the Black church. So, of course, it was always talked about there. So I always knew about prejudice. I always knew about racism. But my parents just sort of created this very positive home, and our church was very positive. So I never really was like, same as your family. I think I was never obsessed with it. I remember in grade 6, I ran for school president of Lighthouse Elementary School. And I had to write a speech, and I was so excited by this. And I had to get up in front of the whole school and read the speech, and then the whole school voted. And a little girl came up to me, I think she was in grade 3 or 4, and she said, "I'm going to vote for you. I don't care if you're Black." And that was the first time I thought, oh, someone might not have voted for me because I was Black. I was like, oh, okay. And that's when it was made clear to me on that day. But my experience was positive. As I got older, then you started to realize, you started to see, and it became more difficult later on.
Alexis?
Yeah, my mom is white and my dad is black. He's from Jamaica. And so I remember hearing stories of people spitting at them on the sidewalk, or someone coming up to my mom in the grocery store when my brother was in his stroller and saying like, "Oh, that's what they look like." And my mom was like, "I beg your pardon." And he talked about like disowning his child because she had decided to marry a black man and had just heard that she had a kid. And so it was like, I didn't know what it would look like and all of that stuff. So like hearing those things but not experiencing them was interesting growing up. But then my brother and I changed schools when I was in grade 2 or going into grade 3, I believe, and everyone else at the school was white, and that was an interesting experience. It weighed on and bothered my brother a lot more than it bothered me. And I don't know whether it's just like my general optimism where I just go, it's fine, like I'll do what I want to do and be who I want to be and suffer the endless questions about my hair and wanting to touch it.
Right. Oh, right.
Yes, I remember the first time I got braids. I came home and my mom was like, "What'd your friends think?" And I was like, "I didn't get recess." She was like, "What?" I was like, there were like a line of people with questions and wanting to touch it. But I do remember like graduating, like after graduating high school, where again, my brother and I were one of maybe 4 black people and maybe one of 5 visible minorities at our high school in London, Ontario. And sort of looking back and like being fascinated that like fascinating and also disappointed and also terrified and also questioning like, was it my job to educate all of those people? Like, was I the example of a black person for the rest of their life? Like, will I constantly be that like the first black person they met, or I had a black friend, or I'm not racist because I was always nice to Alexis in high school. Like I always wonder if I proved to be an example point. I don't know if this makes sense, but I wonder what their relationship to race was when I was the only black one in the school community, and what that meant, and that responsibility that sort of takes on whether I accept it or not, as far as people's experiences and lack of education. And again, that's on them. It's not on me to be the perfect
Sure.
black person for them. But I found that sort of an interesting thing to look back on, especially in this, well, I think Tom, you called it the racial reckoning last summer of
Right,
2020.
right.
But when I've had people from high school like message me about like, I'm so sorry I said that one thing, and that they remember that, or the people that don't remember those things that they said.
Wow.
It's just sort of interesting that growth and that um, opportunity to access information now that maybe wasn't as available online, or also sheer laziness as far as Alexis is maybe the only mixed person in the school, but why is she your only example in your society? Like what is that?
Right. Right. I'm sure it's changing now too, with such an influx of people and diversity in smaller places. Did you? You said you didn't feel a responsibility. Did you feel a difference in terms of intentions coming at you, in terms of like people who are genuinely curious and dare I use the word innocently, if you know what I mean, with not knowing what a better way to approach it, and those who had you meant to hurt? Were
I
you
think
aware of that as a difference, or did it just feel the same thing?
I think I would like to say that I maybe editing that, I do think I felt a responsibility. I do not think I should have felt a responsibility, but I think I
Right.
did feel responsible. And my parents are kind Christians, so their lesson at the end of the day is always be nice, always be accommodating. And when is that not useful? When is that, no, this is my hair and this is my recess and I will enjoy it. Stop touching it. I could have said that. I absolutely not in a zillion years would have ever said that as a young child, though, or understood that like this is personal space. No, thank you. So I think I did feel a responsibility to be a kind, like prime shining example of a awesome Black person, so that would prove a good example, if that makes sense.
It totally
That
makes sense. Absolutely.
representation, which
Which
again I
happens a
shouldn't
lot.
have, but I did.
No, but it happened. That's something that's been now brought more into the light. How there's an expectation to be a good example of a Black person or an Asian person or an Indigenous person or something to, so one person representing your whole race. And when you have that experience, when you're one of two, three in a community, suddenly you feel like, is that my job? Is that, I didn't get the memo, but is that what I'm doing here? Yeah. So that's complicated.
Absolutely.
Towards that, actually, out of a conversation that you and I had, Alexis, when we were working on the Stratford at Home series, the cabaret series, and this is again for both of you, when did you first experience a connection between being Black and being in the arts, good or bad? And it came out of a conversation we had, Alexis, about when you realized it was possible that you could do that. You know what I mean? That's what the world I'm thinking of. Like, how did you kind of go, oh, this is a great thing, or it's a strange thing, or was it a thing at all? Because, this is not, it's not always the case. But since we're there, Alexis, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. I was a super shy kid. My knees kind of still shake when I sing, but my sort of beginning in theater was choir. My little friend group had an argument or something, as 12-year-old girls do, or 12-year-old anyone does. And my mom was like, "You need something that's you. Don't stop singing in the shower. So join a choir. Choir will be good, and it'll be your thing, and you can meet new friends outside of this very small pocket." And I was like, "Great." So choir was sort of my way in to singing. But I remember watching a performance of high schoolers doing Oklahoma at the Grand Theatre in London. And I was like, oh my gosh, you can sing and do more things with it. So I was like, how can I be a part of this? But I tried to audition and I didn't get in. And the interesting thing about that as well was that I sort of undercut myself as well, trying to audition for The Sound of Music. I was like, I'd love to be Maria, but I know I can't. And actually, I don't tell this story often. I thought you were supposed to write your own monologue when you audition for things. So my mom helped me write a monologue, and within the monologue, I apologized for my presence almost. I made a joke about how odd it would be to see a Black Maria. Like I made it into a joke that like maybe not a Black Maria, but a Black nun would be great or something. And I tried to make it okay by making it into a joke by putting that in the monologue, which I thought people wrote. I gotta find that one day. Dead. Don't write your own. Well, no, write your own
Or,
monologue. That's
maybe
great.
yes, sure.
Do it.
No apologies, though. That's all. No apologies. Yeah.
Right? I should read it though and then get back to you. But so I didn't get it, and so my mom was like, "Okay, you need to get more experience." So I went to the Shakespeare School, which is the Stratford summer camp, and I saw Janet Sears' Harlem Duet there. And so it's an all-black cast. It was in the Studio Theater. It is the first time and the last time the Stratford Festival has ever done an all-black cast of a play, unfortunately, for some silly reason. But that's where I saw Karen Robinson. If any of you watch Schitt's Creek, Ronnie. I saw Karen Robinson on stage and I was like, oh my God, a curvy Black woman on the stage. I had never seen that. So I was like, oh, maybe I can do this without having to apologize for myself. So that was a big aha moment for me when I was 16. So it was 2006. And so I kept working at it. But it's interesting how even after that experience, I remember like auditioning for things and assuming that I wouldn't be able to get certain parts because of what I look like or what my experience was. So even coming full circle, my first season at the Stratford Festival was The Sound of Music. And finally booking that was such a really, an awesome full circle moment to say like, okay, like 9 years ago, I didn't even think I could do it. And here I am actually as a nun on the Stratford Festival stage. Why did I have to apologize for that? But my show in that season, the other show was Carousel, and I was auditioning for the best friend, who's Carrie Pipperidge, who Audra McDonald played on Broadway. And Audra McDonald is my hero and was also a huge like visibility factor for me. I'm a legit soprano, so I have got heavy vibrato with whatever I sing. But I hadn't grown up seeing a lot of Black sopranos, and I was informed by what I watched that an ingenue is a small, petite, white girl with like blonde hair and blue eyes. So to me, I was like, well, I'm too big, too curvy, too Black, too tall to play any of those things. So I cut myself out of it in my own brain based on what I'd seen. So when I went in for Carrie for Carousel, I remember they gave me the lead, Julie Jordan sides, and were like, read this. And my first reaction was disappointment because I went, oh, I screwed up. They're giving me the Julie Jordan sides because I'm going to understudy Shalina Kennedy. Like that's who will get it. It can't be me. So it's funny that my own gut reaction was failure and assuming that I didn't do well. And then I booked the lead. Like I had no idea it could happen because I'd never seen it before. So the fact that it then did happen definitely blew my mind, but also proved like such a disappointment in our industry that there was that lack of representation and that lack of visibility. So that norm was not even in my own brain while I was trying to fight for a job I really wanted, but assumed I couldn't get. That was a really long-winded answer.
But it's actually that encompassed a couple of questions I had for you. So actually, that's fantastic, Martha. Yeah.
I was the most confident kid.
Of course you were.
It wasn't until I got into university and in the real world that I just started to realize, the fences that people wanted to put around me.
Okay.
But I grew up in a really bougie Black church, like real bourgeois. Like education was important, speaking with great diction, which is a bigger deal in the US than it is probably in Canada. But there's this whole thing about the way you speak, no ebonics. We were pushed to be educated. We were pushed to do better. So I always knew that the possibilities for me were there. What was instilled in us, though, was because you're Black, you have to be really good. You can't be mediocre. You can't go to opera school and have bad Italian because they'll say, well, of course he's Black. Of course they're not going to have good Italian. Or you can't sing badly because they'll say, well, Black people can't sing Eurocentric music. So it was instilled in me from the beginning, you have to do 150% of what the white people have to do. So I was confident, but I knew I had to work harder. When I got to school, to university, there I met lots of mean people. And that's when I started to realize that there were people against me. And that's when I sadly lost a bit of my confidence. I sometimes wonder what I would be like if I still had that confidence of my youth, where I thought I could do anything and that the world was open to me. But you have to eventually see the real world and be part of the real world. We all do, no matter what color you are. So I did, and I've thrived. I've fought through it. I'm still fighting through it. Um, yeah, and there are more stories on top of that, but you'll probably take us there.
We'll touch on anything we don't get to. Bring it out. But so towards that, I want to go deeper into that for you. Uh, in the opera world, which is where a lot of your training in your early days and the beginning of your glory started with that incredible. If you all have not heard this man sing, good Lord, and both of these people, the most gorgeous voices in Canada, um, coming from that world where opera sort of has a more can have a more colorful approach to casting, and historically, in terms of
Mm.
what's been available. But being inside it and then moving to musical theater, have you found a big difference in terms of how racially diverse casting actually is, or how racism or a race rather is treated inside both of those worlds?
Hmm.
Is it different? Is it not different? Is it good, bad? Where does it sit?
It's both different and not different. That's a weird answer. But with classical music, it's about the voice first. So
Right.
if you can, and I've worked with Christopher Koye, I see him here. We've done opera together. Hi, Christopher. It's about the voice. So like Leon, I don't know if anybody knows who Leontine Price is or Kathleen Battle, any of these opera singers. But they had these exquisite voices. So because that came first, and because you could do Madame Butterfly and you didn't have to be Asian, you could do Aida and you didn't have to be Black, because it was about the voice. It's kind of changing now, I think, but anybody could sing anything. So basically, you just had to sing really, really well. And when I got to theater, it seemed to be slightly more closed. I remember auditioning for the first time I auditioned for Beauty and the Beast. Uh, I didn't get the part, and the choreographer told me later that the director really wanted me because they thought I was the best person for the job, but he was really concerned at how the audience would react when the prince appeared. They were thinking the audience would have a problem with it. So I began to deal with that in theater a bit more. I will say I have had a chance to do The Beast twice, and the audience loved me, so it didn't matter.
That makes me think of your judge in Sweeney, that people were like, how dare a Black man play a bad guy? And you had to come to say, like, I'm pretty sure I'm allowed to choose. I can, why can't I play those parts?
That's kind of, and again, I might be getting ahead of your questions, Tom.
Doesn't
That's
matter.
kind of,
Go ahead, babe.
that's the fear I have a little bit with. The awakening is great. The awakening is great and important, but sometimes people can be over woke, if that's a thing.
Sure.
And I've had reviewers write about, oh, the Shaw Festival is so racist for making you Judge Turpin because it opens with a rape, with Judge Turpin raping.
Right.
And I'm like, I wanted to do this role. I want to be a bad guy. I don't want to be the Tin Man all my life. I've done the Tin Man and it's great, but that's not the only thing I want to do. So we can be too woke. Like, I should have a chance to choose the kind of roles I want to do. And the audience and reporters and woke people should give me a chance to make my own decisions.
Right. And that's very real. I mean, a great part is a great part. Like if I want to play a hooker and I want to do Sweet Charity, listen, I want the chance to do it. Don't stop me because of my color. It's the lead. Come on, she's a great role. Oh my God, the times I've done Sweet Charity. No, but anyway, but yes, all of that. It all depends on what it is. With this idea, there are so many stories coming out now about uh, some of the outrageous things, the microaggression, things that get said to people of color that are said sometimes innocently, sometimes not so innocently, but are sort of surprising that people don't realize what they're saying, although not blatant, is so still kind of has an obvious racism inside it or unkindness. In the world of theater, which has a reputation for being more inclusive, we think, and certainly musical theater even more so, we have heard many things that are shocking. We know, and with the forum at Stratford that was done, many things came out that were revealed in terms of treatment and instances. And it's not really about if a person of color has had something shocking or horrifying said to them. It's usually a case of what was it and what happened. So, have either of you experienced that in terms of those comments, the offhand comments, or of course the more obvious ones, but sometimes it's those smaller ones that you think, really, how can you not know that that's insulting? And this smile, yeah. So there you go. So off you go.
Specifically within the theater?
Well, I mean, I think so. Yes, that's the world that we're sort of thinking of now. Otherwise, I think we could go on forever if that's the case. I mean, let's not pretend. In the real world, and it goes on ad nauseum. But certainly in the world of theater, where I think it's more surprising because we think of ourselves as artists as being so inclusive, or we think we want to think of ourselves that way. And I think more than general public theater is, and musical theater even a step more can be very inclusive. Yet it happens, and I think people don't want to believe that that's not, that's, we're such nice people, we're such loving, caring, vulnerable people. Unfortunately, that doesn't stop it from happening. So what have you been your experiences in terms of that world?
I mean, I find it's tricky, especially in fittings and in wardrobe. Our jobs are so vulnerable in the first place, and as much as I respect that there is a there are many ways that you can be insulting to an actor standing basically naked, about to try on a costume. It's shocking the lack of sensitivity that can occur, from size judgments to, oh, like your measurements don't fit from last year. Those like passive aggressive things that happen where you go, oh, I didn't say that you look bigger this year, but it's only relevant because you're putting clothes on me. But did you check in with me that why do my measurements have to stay the same? Last time I checked, humans change. Or all of the aggressions within that. But there is something that is so much more of a gut punch in, again, those vulnerable spaces when it is racist. I've had, oh my gosh, I did Robert Lepage's Coriolanus, which was an awesome experience. But the designer was telling me about, I played Virgilia, Coriolanus's wife, and she said she wanted to go with this Mediterranean theme, and it was a shame that oh no, that she initially wanted Virgilia to have red hair, but well, we got you, so uh and then kept talking, and I sat there just like shocked, well, obviously shocked, but also like Coriolanus was black. There was everything within the design was so specifically not Mediterranean as well, that I was like, okay, maybe for Fiona and Brigadoon, I could see your disappointment for a lack of red hair in your design, but I've also played that and I didn't have red hair.
Right.
But where in the script of Shakespeare's Coriolanus do you find disappointment that I can't have red? Like, I ruined your design.
Clearly, yes.
Because you wanted a part that has nothing, no specifications on hair to. So I found that a really annoying, like, tick to, and I didn't say anything, but a bunch of people sort of tweeted a few microaggressions last year through Stratford, encouraging an in the dressing room #forum to say, please show the world the things that we've had to swallow and not say anything about for fear of being rude or difficult to work with. Screw that, you were insulted, what happened? And I ended up tweeting that experience without specificities, but the assistant designer ended up contacting me and saying, I remember that I was in the room, and I'm so sorry I didn't say anything. I remember being as shocked as you, but I was in the position of power that I should have spoke up, and I'm so sorry. And I was like, wow, thank you. Wow. That was kind of a cool moment, and I think, again, especially hair and black hair as well. They used my own hair for carousel plus a piece, and it was difficult to work with. Like, of course, it's raining outside. It's a little frizzier today. If you didn't want to work with real hair, it's called a full wig, Stratford. You've got the budget. So why are we having this? Like, all of those little discussions can be tricky. And my latest one was actually for Brigadoon at Shaw. The costume designs were all white people. And so that was sort of that sad gut punch as well, where
do you mean the drawings were
all of the drawings,
just for clarity?
yeah.
Yes, right. So
yeah,
they knew you were cast.
Yes, we're another moment where I was like, I have been cast for 1.5 years. Like, you didn't just get the memo, like, and you didn't just get the memo 2 months ago. Like, you knew. Right.
Yeah.
So I found that like on the first day when you're so excited and they're showing the set design, you're like, it's beautiful, and everyone's like, we're making a show. And then she apologized for making she says, my costume designs are cartoony, so don't take them personally. And I remember going, you're not allowed to pre-apologize. Like, you're drawing us at the end of the day. You're drawing my character, you're drawing something I have to step into and that you're going to put on the wall every time I walk into a fitting room rehearsal, a fitting room appointment. And again, I'm standing basically naked in front of you. That is what I have to look at as you put the pieces you drew on her, on me. So I just remember thinking, like, there's such a, it's such a sensitive environment, but there are so many ways, very obvious ways you would think to not microaggressively shove the, well, I pictured a white woman with black hair and a purple dress, and but I wrote Alexis Gordon beside it. Like, I found that confusing.
Right.
And luckily Shaw's wonderful, and I went through the right channels to say, like, no, thank you. That should never happen again. Like, who needs to stop that before the first day of rehearsal?
Right.
And me have to see it. Peter Fernandez is the bartender. That doesn't look like him at all. Everyone else of color is just not
Right.
of color.
Right. The white neutral.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you have colored pencils to draw my purple dress, but not my face. Like, I just.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe they don't realize sometimes maybe that all the colors together make brown. So it's in there. You just okay, fine. Marcus, what
I love this question, Thom. And I think right now we're spending so much time talking about like the top of the institutions and education, but we're not always talking about our colleagues. Like, I think students among students can be awful.
Yes.
I think actors amongst actors can say awful things. And I'll give you a list. I'm just gonna throw up a list here. And some of them are probably more aggressive than microaggressions.
Right.
But I remember sitting at a makeup table, and I came into the room and I sat down, and the woman turned and looked at me who was doing my makeup, and she turned to her boss and she goes, "Oh," she said, "I only have makeup for the normal people. Do you have something for him?" That was said. When O.J. Simpson was, when the verdict came out for O.J. Simpson, I was doing an opera in Honolulu. And there's a space that my character hides in before I come out onto the stage. And someone had made a noose and placed it right in my hiding spot. So it was the last thing I saw before I had to get on stage and sing. My heart was pounding. It was awful. I was doing the Mikado, which we don't really do anymore, but everybody probably knows the Mikado. Everyone in the Mikado was white with Asian makeup on. I was the only Black person in the Mikado with Asian makeup on. And somebody came up to me and said, "It is so weird that you're in this show." I was the one called out. It's like, oh, so all the white people can play Asian, but I can't play Asian? I can't play anything? That was one. When we were doing the Music Man at the Stratford Festival, Darren Hebert, who you might know, played the Music Man. And he's a wonderful, Black, charismatic, incredible actor. He made that role his own because he doesn't believe in that weird word of colorblind casting, because when the audience sees you, they see your color that you shouldn't have to hide. So he brought himself to the role. And I heard backstage somebody say, "Does he really have to be that Black? We know you're Black." So basically, they didn't want him to be himself. Those are just some things. Yeah.
That's a pretty ample list off the top of your head. Right.
Oh, yeah.
It's tip of the iceberg. You know, a lot of stories came out then. Speaking of this, you actually said this one of my questions. Colorblind casting is a term that I've loathed from day one. What are both of your thoughts about that?
I don't think it's possible. I really don't. Because a director could say, "Oh, we don't." Well, first of all, it shouldn't be. I should be able to bring myself to the role. I always have a backstory for my characters. So So I make it work in my head, I make it work in my body, I make it work with my story as the character. So I shouldn't have to hide who I am, because then I don't know what I'm supposed to be, then I would be lost.
Right.
And secondly, the audience sees us for who we are, so we have to play that. That's my thinking.
Right. Alexis?
I think I brought this up with our last chat as well. I I don't believe in colorblind casting. I think that was I feel like it was a useful step to get to where we're trying to be or where we are, though.
Yeah.
It's like an affirmative action thing where, like, how can we use our language to translate to people that we can cast diversely?
Right.
How do we just shove it down the throat first, but then they'll get it, and then we'll call it color conscious casting, and we'll get over ourselves, hopefully by then.
Right.
I always bring up Brandy's Cinderella on Disney. Rewatched it the other week, wept, loved it so much. It came out when I was 7, and like it blew my mind. I was like, Brandy marries this beautiful Filipino prince whose parents are Victor Garber and Whoopi Goldberg. Like, yes, like why can't theater do like? But it's so dumb. Like theater, I walk on the stage. This is perfect. I'm wearing green, and I say, "I'm a tree," and the audience goes, "She's a tree."
Right.
Full stop. The prince comes on and he turns to mom and dad, Victor Garber and Whoopi Goldberg, and we're like, those are his parents. Like we say, yes, great, next. Like we don't hang on to those stupid things. And if you do, maybe it's part of the plot, or maybe you're kind of racist. So, especially in this make-believe theater setting, and I think theater gets away with so much more than in film, but I feel like we've stopped tiptoeing around the idea that we need to be polite to the racist audience members that will not engage or will say you couldn't possibly be that person's daughter because you don't look the same. Like I think the idea of blended families, of mixed families is also, again, a bit more mainstream, but I think it took those baby steps of whatever colorblind casting was to get to where we are now. But I don't think it's possible in a way to erase oneself when on stage. But how do you, not only as the actor, but as the director, how do you engage to make it a safe space for your performers if you are breaking that non-traditional cast? Are you actually taking care of the idea of Marcus playing a villain, and that some people might do that, but that won't happen, or that shouldn't matter because we've talked about it, we've tackled it, we're making sure that there's a balance, we're making sure that there's a discourse, a discussion around it. Like where can those responsibilities be supported just as much as you should support any character going through a rough journey within a play, a Desdemona in an Othello? Like you have to take care of that performer and that their journey. That should be the same when casting anyone and everything. If that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. That was actually all sort of the next question I had for you guys. Yeah, that's really, really. A friend of mine and I, around the time into that moment we talked about colorblind casting, we sort of realized it's actually color conscious casting.
Yeah.
It's you actually cast and go, oh, what an interesting opportunity. Now, what does that mean for the show, and let it trickle through. And sometimes you go, you need to do nothing with it other than sort of feel what that means, and it would. But often there's some little thing, even a little detail, but to not have it talked about is the problem. And I'm a big believer in at least look at what that is, because it changes everything. If you've got someone who, we've all had the experience of playing characters. It's my wrote here that I want to sort of read it this way. I don't want to mess this up. Playing roles traditionally played by white actors, and what that specifically means is characters that have been written by a writer who consciously or unconsciously has a white being in their mind while writing that role. If that's not a white body, what does that mean? It's just asking the question. There might not be a big answer, but we have to ask the question. I want to open it up before we get into sort of this hour goes by so quickly. Are there questions?
Can I just add to that too, though, that
Yes.
the idea that theater should answer more questions than propose more questions is wrong. Like you should leave the theater wondering. You should leave the theater with questions. You should leave the theater a little bit more educated, or a bit more uncomfortable, or a bit more aware of the world around you. And the idea that we have to give everyone a perfect vanilla cupcake by the end of the show. It kind of drives me mad. We've got like junk food TV, we've got like junk food theater sometimes, but I think good theater asks more questions than gives answers. Like maybe not everything will be solved by the end of the show, but I think that that's a good thing. And
I
I think
like
we have to
vanilla
be patient.
cupcakes.
I love vanilla cupcakes too, but I wanna bite into it, and then there's a custard where I'm like, what was this delightful surprise?
I'm
What is
surprised.
this?
Little
You know?
raspberry jam in there. Would it kill anyone? Come on.
Amen. Yes. Surprise me, thrill me.
Well, the world is full of wonderful tastes and surprises. I think that the idea that we're in now is that why does it have to be just one flavor, and a pre-described, prescribed flavor? What if it's full of surprises? What if it's got some bacon in it? What if it's got some caramel drizzled on top? And like anything else, it's funny. We like to think of uh we like to think of how everything has it gets better when you add this and add that food or art or a painting and yet with human beings we have this strange block in so many ways. So this is what these conversations are about, is opening that up to go, wait a minute, what if everyone comes to the table and brings their dish,
Mhm.
and we all have a great big feast. So towards that, who's got some seasonings they want to ask about? Anyone, some questions, anything at all for Marcus or Alexis or myself or oh, here we go. Okay, hi. How do you say your name? I want to. Kalia.
Yeah, that's right, Kalia.
Kalia, it's beautiful. As a mixed person myself, Indian and Black, I've always wondered what roles mixed people of color can play. Is there a way to play both despite presenting more than another? I see. Yes. I mean, for one thing, oh, it's a funny thing, right? It's that's kind of complicated in the way that, I mean, yes, I guess is the answer. If it's your heritage, one wants to think that's your right to do that. But like my heritage is like white and black, so I don't get people don't think of me as a white person if I'm playing the part, but I can play parts that white people play. Do you know what I mean? Unless it's about race, then there's no reason why I can't play whatever that part might be. Uh, it gets more complicated. I mean, there's a question of it's a question of like when you've got I saw a whole thread this morning about this kind of world of who can play what when you're what color? Like white people should be playing the roles of black people or Asian people. Well, no, because you have so many opportunities to play other things. But can a black person play an Asian person or South Asian or vice versa? It's the lived experience. But when you're both person of color, so sort of you know what I mean? Like you're a race that has not had the same opportunities. That gets complicated. I've played to my career. I played Hispanic. I played Italian. I played Egyptian. I played Middle Eastern because my coloring is sort of in between. So I've gotten all kinds of roles. I've played Asian. I've done The King and I, and wore more makeup than Anna. Not gonna lie. So it, it's we're in a different moment, and I think that we're having conversations to decide what does that all mean. I'm not sure what that means. Marcus, Alexis, any thoughts?
I mean, I think it's within reason as well, and like that's also going to be up to the team, like and what they want to do with certain pieces. But I think an important lesson that I've learned is, will know what I want to play, but don't cut myself off from certain things because of how it's been traditionally done. But that being said, like, do we need another Mikado with like everyone portray, like, like there's maybe some parts where like, no, we got to reevaluate those things. But
Right.
should you play Sarah Brown in Guys and Dolls? Like, absolutely, yes. Like, there's no reason you shouldn't. Does it come with people leaving going, well, I always knew Sarah Brown was bossy, but like when it's a black woman and she's bossy, is that saying something about black? Like, let people will do that digging no matter what. So don't take those things on. But there's also a beauty in you bringing your perspective, your point of view, your side of what that character could be, and updating that. Like a lot of those traditional musical theater roles, like they need a boost. A lot of the women are underwritten, and that is to say that they're written by men traditionally, and usually white men, and so they might not write it outright for saying they're an idiot, but in a lot of cases there's some tiptoeing and some genius weaving that you have to do as a woman in a lot of dated theater pieces to try and add a third dimension to it. I did a play at Shaw called Rope, written by Patrick Hamilton, and he actually wrote in the character description that it may seem like Layla has some intelligence underneath, but she doesn't. Like, he did not like women, and if you look him up, like, he was a misogynist, like, he was awful. So my duty then is not only to figure out my character's arc, but also, yeah, like, I said screw that and ripped it with the director, chatting with the director, who is Jenny Lawson. She's like, absolutely rip that character description and set out of your play and set it on fire. That is not useful. How dare he? Why are we doing this play? We'll get to that later. But how can you, Alexis Gordon, an intelligent woman, bring you to this role and find ways around how he cut women out of the play with actual intelligence added, as opposed to I just twirl my hair and chew bubblegum and I'm an archetype. That sometimes is a challenge, but again, I was entrusted to update it and make it so much more, and I hope I accomplished that. Yeah.
No. Marcus.
Both my parents are, whoa, the sun is like just hitting me. Both my parents are Black, so that's not a struggle that I've had to deal with. But I do have there is Indigenous blood in my family, and it's not, I'm not very well educated in what it is exactly. But I just did a workshop of a Powaggan Macbeth, which is an Indigenous version of Macbeth, and I was the only non-Indigenous person in the room, and I have to say it was I really felt out of place, because the traditions are so strong and they were also connected in that I really, for the first time, kind of knew what it felt like to be, I don't know, the one white person in a room or something like that. I just didn't want to make any mistakes and say the wrong thing. But they were very welcoming. But again, I haven't had to deal with maybe what Kalia, what you've had to deal with, or Thom or Alexis.
Any other questions? Someone else? Yes. So Kimi, do you find that the topic of race is tiptoed around, or is it more of an open conversation in the professional theater scene? If so, are you usually the one starting the conversation? Ooh, interesting. Marcus?
Well, right now we're talking about it. So I think for the longest time there was some tiptoeing. I know because I'm older than Alexis, so I came up in a period where we were kind of quiet because we didn't want to upset anybody, because the Black people were lucky to be in the room, so we had to be good. And I think it's a bit different now where people are speaking more. So no, we shouldn't tiptoe. Please don't tiptoe. Yeah.
I think it's still stressful. Like, I had to call a producer and talk about an issue that I had as far as like a lack of representation on the other side, where it's tricky because everyone's trying to do better right now, and we're all taking steps, and how far is not far enough for your comfortability. If you have an issue, has it been laid out? The steps to take to bring that up? Are you new in the company or the cast and you feel like you don't have the power? Is there someone more experienced you're able to turn to, or someone with more courage to speak up in the room? Sometimes it's scary too. I think it always used to come at the cost of your job. Like, oh gosh, if I say this, I'm difficult, I'll never get hired again. I guess when I try and speak up now, I try and flag all of those things and say, we started to talk about, like, what is the cost of having to constantly speak up for oneself, as opposed to someone being educated and coming at it at a particular way without you having to freely give that advice or freely flag the problem. But I try and, I've been trying to say, like, I have a problem with this. I was hoping that there would be more diversity here, or I feel tokenized here, or I feel left out here. And when I say it, I say I would just like to flag that this is stressful for me. I'd like to flag that this comes at a cost. I've brought this up to you, and it makes me scared that you will react or not like what I say, and my repercussions will be this, this, and this. And in that way, I feel like that helps with combat my fear and helps affirm my decision in saying, like, I'd rather speak up than stay silent right now, but it helps take off the load that it puts on me as well, if that makes sense. To try and just make it a team effort as well, as opposed to, I'm not here to lecture, or but I would like this to be better, and hopefully we can work towards that. Yeah. Market.
Marcus?
Sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't mean to interrupt you. I totally agree with what Alexis is saying. And I think you as students are, oh God, this sun, I am so sorry. I'm in a sunroom and it's moving around. I think you as students are in a very interesting situation because you're at a point where you're still learning, but you're also at an age when you want to change the world. I remember that very well. So there's like a balance that you want to ask questions, but you also need to continue to learn. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes like sometimes life experience will color your opinions of things. Do you know what I mean? I hated it when I was 20 and everybody used to say, oh, you're so young, you don't know anything. So they didn't give me an opportunity to speak. And I did have ideas and thoughts, and some of them haven't changed, but a lot of them have. When I was younger, people always wanted me to sing Old Man River, and I was always offended by that because I was like, oh, I can sing other songs. I don't just want to sing that black song. But now I sing it all the time and I love it. And I know that it moves people, and I know it has a great message. And I know it was written by someone who did their research, and they were writing music for Black people when no one else was. So I've sort of changed my mind in that thinking. So I encourage you all to find a balance and remembering your students and your learning, and you need to listen, but also finding that place where you can ask questions and not just sit back and let wrong things happen. Does that make sense?
And I think in the idea of that as well, like the power of mentorship is really helpful as well. When you come across something and you're not sure how to deal with it, like find a mentor, like message someone on Instagram, reach out, like find a buddy to be able to mull that stuff over with, so you can find comfort and power in your community as well. And like bringing, if you have a conflict in the room as well, like there's something to not stopping the entire room maybe, but messaging them after, going to the stage manager saying, can I have a one-on-one conversation? I'm not sure you meant to say this, but I felt uncomfortable in this moment. I would like to flag it out before it blows up to anything else. Just felt this whatever in the room. That's also just dealing with it in those smaller personal spaces as well can usually diffuse a lot of tension that sometimes can build up if you are struck in a room and you do want to have someone say something or call that out. I just got to work at the Shaw Festival in the fall with Kimmy Rampersad leading the room. And the way that she and Paul Sportelli, the music director, and Ryan D'Souza, the other music director, went about like starting our room off by trying to be as inclusive and open to discussion as possible was like the most stunning thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And I hope every room looks like that, but I know it doesn't. But we did a Cole Porter show at one point, and he uses a lot of problematic language in his songs. And so we started our Cole Porter section rehearsal, and they were like, let's talk. And we're like, oh, I thought we were going to start with music. And they're like, nope, we can't because we haven't talked about it. He's like, the one of the songs we would love to do has racist lyrics against Asians. We are not going to choose those verses because Cole Porter, God love him, wrote 27 different versions that you can pick from. But is that enough? And we had a discussion where we're like, okay, well, should we do Cole Porter at all? Should we not cut him? Like, should we just say, screw you, your language is problematic? Or do we say, oh, I'll pick another verse in that case? We came to the conclusion that we didn't feel comfortable just picking other lyrics for certain songs without acknowledging the fact that we had to not choose certain lyrics. So we ended up having a pre-show speech while we did our usual. We did a land acknowledgement before every show, and we talked about the structure, I think, of the other shows that we did as well. And our Cole Porter show in particular, we added a tidbit about the fact that we had to choose and cut very specifically for Cole Porter, and that was an education process for us, but we wanted to share that. We didn't want you to just enjoy Cole Porter. You go home, put it up on YouTube, and hear the other lyrics we didn't choose and go like, whoa, because some people don't realize. One of the songs though was Night and Day, and it starts out with the beat 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 of the tom toms. Like, what does that mean? Like, what was he being like? Was that exotification? Our conclusion was yes. And so we were like, he didn't write alternate lyrics for that. And there are actually a lot of other great Cole Porter songs we can pick. So we ended up just saying like, let's throw that one out. One of the other songs has the line, do the voodoo that you do so well. And one person, I was like, I don't know much about voodoo. Like, because again, is that exotification? Like, what are we actually talking about? It's a cute lyric and there's something very sexy about it. And some person was like, voodoo is a serious religious thing for some people, and if we don't have the tools to talk about it, then let's pick another song. And so right in that moment we were like, there are other songs to pick from, but it was only because our room was set up right from the get-go and the conversation was started from the team that we all felt comfortable to 100% say how we felt. So I dream of that room for everyone, but that was an example of like it being led by the team and us having the most productive conversations I've ever had. So with that in mind, my hope is that it will be getting better for sure as time goes on.
So towards that, with this next question, how many POC directors have each of you had compared to white ones? And are there any major differences you've noticed between directorial styles or collaboration with the cast and crew? Good question. I can only think of one person of color I've had as a director, and I've been doing this for 37 years. There might be someone I forgot, like a small, brief moment of something, but and the person I had didn't direct musicals, so it was a review that she barely put her hands on. So I couldn't tell you if she's a good director or not, because basically I was directing myself, and we were sort of left to our own devices with a bit of staging of go here, go there. But and it was a black show, but we were sort of left to our own devices, which happens in musicals too often, unfortunately. So that's me. Marcus?
I've worked with two, and one of them made a lot of mistakes. So you can be a director of color and still not have done your homework. So yeah, and I mean, made a lot of mistakes in terms of dealing with indigenous issues, for example. Yeah, so we're none of us are immune to that.
It's interesting to flag within that, because I did have a director, an Indigenous director, who screwed up a lot, unfortunately, and the temperature in the room was not wonderful. It's interesting to talk about, though, the pressure I felt for her to have done better, to succeed, and like I had a greater disappointment as a female, and let alone a female person of color director. I felt disappointment and embarrassment and frustration and worry that, was this taking us back 5 steps? Was this saying like, that's why women shouldn't direct, that's why women of color should, like, I felt that weight as well and on me. And I find that interesting, again, sort of alluding to like, why does one person screwing up have to result in that one person's background? No one should be trusted, like that sort of feel. And the people in the room are lovely and wouldn't do that, but that sort of left me sad, like especially sad and disappointed with that experience. And that want for them to do better. But why do we always have to give 150 million% when I've worked with plenty of old white men who've screwed up worse? Like, why why does that have to happen? The other two I've worked with is Philip Aiken, who's a frickin' dream, would like, he is number one on my list to work with again. And again, Kimmy Rampersad, who is a frickin' dream. But then, yeah, now I've just thought of one more in a workshop that was very disorganized. But again, there's 2 and 2. There is balance. But it's interesting that consequence or that responsibility I felt, especially to be a cheerleader for them despite their screwing up, because I worried about the stereotypical arguments that would come off of that.
Right. Which brings up the issue. No, go ahead, Marcus. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I just want to say that the issue of opportunity. Many white people are given the chance to direct things with little or no ability in some cases, and gain experience and get better. And so few people of color are put in positions in theater of directing, designing, musical directing. Like you can now name a bunch of designers or musical directors of color in Canada. If you can't have the chance to do it, how do you know how to do it? How do you get better at doing it? How do you become skilled at that? We have a lot of performers now who are getting opportunities, but that's where theaters have kept people of color on the stage, where it's seen and go, see, look what we've done. And that's been a problem that has also come up, is that we're not given the chance to direct at a big theater, to direct in a small theater, to design, to do the lighting, whatever, to gain the craftsmanship skills. Marcus, you were going to say something?
Well, I will add to that, like even some of the great people that you see in Canada directing, they all weren't what they are now. I'm talking about white directors. They aren't what they are now, but they were given opportunities long ago where they could work to get better. So if you went back to look at some of the old productions, you might think, oh, I'm surprised that's not what I'm seeing now. But they had a chance to work on it. So we do need to give opportunity for people and let them maybe not be so great at first as they get better. The other thing I wanted to say, though, I talked to the kids about the balance, and for the teachers, I think it must be really hard to be a teacher or a white teacher or a white director right now, because you're in a place where you have to listen, but you still want to be that teacher. And I just want you to know that I understand you and I'm on your side. I teach at another college, and we have meetings amongst the faculty about the awakening, the stuff we're talking about now. And I find that all the white teachers are just quiet. They don't say anything. But every once in a while, I'll get a private message. Not that they're asking, not that they're using my time inappropriately, but they sometimes feel more comfortable with me. I'm not saying this very well. The teachers don't find that the rooms are safe for them to speak. And I just want you to know that you are still the leaders in these schools. You are still the teachers. I think the main difference besides listening is that you have to come more prepared than you ever were before. So like there can't be any stones unturned, because this new generation is going to ask those really difficult questions. And we just had a situation where someone was hired and that person freaked out by the questions asked and quit. Yeah, and took off. And I was sad for this person because I love this person, incredibly talented, this person has all the goods to direct and teach, but they were so afraid of answering the questions incorrectly that they froze and took off. And now the students, they look at that person who should have been a mentor and they're disappointed. So the reason I'm telling this story, I feel like I'm ending on a low note here. The reason I'm telling this story is just that I hope we keep our positions as teachers and mentors, be strong, and just make sure that you're able to answer those questions. Take the time to answer those questions, and the students will respect that. They will respect that if you can answer their questions, and then they'll be with you. So I just wanted to make sure we didn't leave without that being said.
I think off that too, there's a balance to openness, but as an educator, right? I think it's very difficult to be wrong, especially nowadays. It's very, what I posted on Instagram. I think it was a Brene Brown quote, but I sort of have been saying a similar quote of like, I don't want your perfect activism. I want you to be active. I think in that sort of idea, like we don't, as we educate, we don't always have to be right, or there doesn't have to be a finality. There can be a gray space to lean into, or an acknowledgement of history and tradition and beliefs, but an openness for where it's going to go, and that there two ideas can be held at the same time. And there's no shame or bad or wrong about that. This also made me think though of talking about bringing people of color into spaces that are traditionally white. You can't just sort of dump us in and expect it to be perfect as well. And again, that's why I believe in that power of mentorship. And I think that's a beautiful thing that allies can do, and that theaters should also be doing as well while they bring people of color in. Is don't be shocked that the POC you brought in with who lacks experience because of who they are didn't hit it out of the park on the first try in your white institution, when you didn't provide them any steps for success, or you didn't check in, or you didn't give them the booklet, you didn't give them that mentorship, you don't have to hold their hand, but what could you have given more to that relationship for that transition to be more seamless, as opposed to being shocked when they failed in a system that they've just been invited to. There's an amazing Rupi Kaur quote on that, but I couldn't find it. But I love her.
Amazing. I know we have to close this up. I just want to quickly, this last question is interesting about casting directors. Do you think casting directors sometimes cast based on a so-called quota that needs to be filled in order to be seen as diverse? How can equitable casting happen without it seeming like a quota or tokenizing of people of color? Great question. Short answer, yes, they do, but they shouldn't. And we're in a place right now where they can't get away with it like that anymore. It's see people who are talented and don't decide that the part has to be white. And there are many things being put in place now, rules that are changing that say you have to see people. And actually, they're trying to implement a way that you, certainly like on paper, ethically, people have to cast a certain percentage of just not white people in their shows, or in their seasons, or whatever it is, that it's not just, you're just not allowed to do that, and everyone's going to stay quiet about it. So it's changing, but like anything else, Alexis said, is people have to have the chance to grow into it and have the space to come in and fail, and then come back and like try that again, extra help, or whatever it is to give the opportunities. So it's all changing. Really, that's what it's about. Everything here is about it's changing. It's changing a little faster than it has changed. It is not changing quickly, but it is changing with a momentum, which is really helpful. And as has been said, we're all trying, really. I mean, white or black or Asian or any people of color or white people, everyone's trying. Not everyone in those groups are people in those groups. Someone in all of those groups are trying to be better and move forward. Not everyone, otherwise you wouldn't have to be here doing this. But there's movement, and it's hard. I think that's the thing, is let it be hard. Let's all accept that it's hard and go, okay, well, it's going to be hard. So all of us need to come to the table with a curious and a loving heart. Then we can find answers together. And so thank you for letting us come and speak with you today.
Yay. Marcus, the lighting is epic. You look like you are in this
amazing.
beautiful photo shoot. I love it.
I'm never going to come in this room again at this time of night.
I'm going to always call you at that time of night, like right now. I'm going to
right here.
I need the thinker's pose from you, you know? Like, I need the, yes.
All three of you, thank you. So on behalf of St. Lawrence College Music Theater Department, hopefully one day you will see some of these faces in shows with you, which would be amazing. But thank you so much for coming and speaking with us. It really, really meant a lot. I know it meant a lot to the students. And you're beautiful. I love you. I hope I get to see you all in person one of these days.
Can I just add too, like if we didn't get to your question, like find me on Instagram and shoot me a message or something. We're not scary celebrity people or something. We're real humans and we care. So
Corral, I see that you had put something in there that you had a really long question and you probably were wanting to say it out loud. So maybe, yeah, reach out. I'm sure that.
By all means. Sorry, we couldn't get to. I was missing things that started to go quickly in there. But yeah.
Thank you all. Yay.
Find us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Yes, I just want to take the time just before the Zoom call ends, and I just want to personally thank you all for